Hello, welcome to Grid Life Wrap-Up. I'm Joe Samyega, and with me we have Ben Schneider from Grid Life Encore and NASCAR.info, and Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight. Kobe, Ben and I, we just got done with our first Grid Life After Dark. Any plans to be on a future After Dark show?
Oh, Joe, I would absolutely love to be on the After Dark show, but unfortunately, look at my current work schedule. I don't know when that's going to happen because I'm currently working on the team that works on NASCAR.com with the Xfinity and the truck races, and we had two busy evenings, Friday night, Saturday night. So unfortunately, that meant I wasn't able to be on this After Dark show. But if the opportunity arises in the future, I'd love to. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make the one in China at the next Formula One race, but if the opportunity ever arises with my schedule clear, I'd absolutely love to be on the After Dark show. And Ben, why are you bringing my Carolina Panthers into this, man? I'm like, come on, wait, we're not even on the field and we're still catching strays from somebody.
I mean, I didn't want to do it, but Joe brought in the Dallas Cowboys, and I was like, well, wait a second. At least the Cowboys actually have some rings from back in the 90s. I know they're gathering a lot of dust. It's like Ferrari's championships here, as we are going to get into the Formula One race here in just a moment. But I was like, okay, I got to think of a team that is not very good right now that doesn't have that championship history. And like, to your credit, I brought it up at the end. You guys did make a Super Bowl in a not too distant past. So you do have an NFC championship at the very least. Ended up coming up short in Super Bowl 50, but it was the first team that came to my mind, and I apologize for that. The other team that came to my mind was the Charlotte Hornets, so as well, but that would be the exact same issue. So,
well, I don't disagree there.
If you haven't seen the episode, the link's in the video description to yesterday's After Dark. And a big thank you to our patrons calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, for investing in the Grid Network. Each and every month, you too can invest in the Grid Network through Patreon or make a one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee or YouTube Super Chat. We're going to update the leaderboard. Amber, yesterday during the After Dark, did a Super Chat. We thanked her on the air. We answered her question. And we'll do the same if you do it not after dark. So a little bit, a super chat today. And of course, $10 more through the super chat or Patreon. You get some Grid Network stickers sent out to you. So be sure to don't miss out on that. And the easiest way to support us, hit the bell icon, subscribe to the Grid Network right here, because we got a busy week of motorsports up ahead. Been not too busy of a weekend, but just enough to where we had the After Dark episode. It did a Formula One race where the top two positions everyone sort of anticipate, but seemed to be a pretty good battle throughout the field, actually.
That's right, Joe. We've come back down to reality here. Max Verstappen is back to his winning ways. He restarts his winning streak at Suzuka once again. Of course, now aim to make it 2 in a row when we come back to the Chinese Grand Prix here in just a couple of weeks. But Sergio Perez, let's talk about him and give him some credit as well. Flawless drive to second place in the race. Red Bull looked absolutely unstoppable, so chalk up another 1-2 for RBR. But the battle for third place was far from settled early. Carlos Sainz got the best of his teammate Charles Leclerc and former teammate at McLaren Lando Norris. There was even a point during the race where Ferrari ordered Leclerc to remind him the battle was with Norris, not with his teammate Sainz. So Sainz was released to claim another podium and continue his podium streak to start the year as well. Of course, he missed the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, but every race that he's been in this year, he's been on the podium. So, Kobe, let's, on that note, talk about Carlos Sainz. Are you shocked that he got the orders to go by? And do you think he's in a position where he could seriously challenge Ferrari leadership in terms of who gets priority in the race and ultimately the championship?
Based on how Carlos Sainz's performance to start off this year, I'm actually not surprised that Ferrari gave him the orders to get by and collect another podium. I have a feeling if Carlos was able to race in Saudi Arabia, he would have been able to have a podium in every single race that he's entered. And it's been so amazing to see how strong he's been at the start of this season. And like we were saying early in previous shows, it seems like when Carlos Sainz heard about the news of Lewis Hamilton replacing him, it really lit a fire under him, and that fire is still burning strong. And I just wish, that Ferrari had a car strong enough to challenge Red Bull, because I have a feeling if the Ferrari and the Red Bull were on equal grounds based on how Carlos Sainz is driving right now, maybe, just maybe, he would be able to take the fight to Max Verstappen. But unfortunately, that's not the world we live in. Even Toto Wolff said himself, and recently after the Japanese Grand Prix, he basically said that Max Verstappen is, basically already the champion elect. It's just it's an inevitable thing that's going to happen this year once again. But getting back to your question, Carlos Sainz, he is doing some really amazing driving right now. And looking at Sainz and Charles Leclerc, a lot of people always assume Charles Leclerc would be the number one driver at Ferrari, but it seems like Carlos Sainz is going to challenge him to that on his way out.
I have to agree with you, Kobe, on everything, especially for me. I anticipated that since Charles Leclerc was ahead in the points, and we know that's mainly because Carlos Sainz missed out, no points at all from Saudi Arabia, that the team was just going to let them race. And then we hear that radio communication, you're battling Lando Norris. That, I think, indicates how this team, under Fred's leadership, is not just, okay, we have one driver that is number one, regardless, especially with the stand-ins being contradictory to what's going on the track, because I thought Charles Leclerc was just going to stay up the front unless they race each other. But to see those team orders, that was really interesting. I know team orders are not exactly the most popular topic in motorsports here, but the big thing I think overall is when I'm looking at essentially everything going on with the Ferrari team, I'm getting more confident because, as you said, Kobe, if Ferrari had a car that was equal to Red Bull right now, I think overall we could see Carlos Sainz being that main contender to Max Verstappen. He just seemed to have lit a fire that he's going to be out of a ride. I'm really curious to see if Carlos, the big thing, keep this all year long, because if he does, if Red Bull has more mistakes, or we get to a track where qualifying doesn't work out well and he's second behind Max Verstappen, we could see some great racing, especially on tracks where you don't have so much of a dirty line on that initial start, nearly equal. That could be a very entertaining turn one, and should be a very entertaining year ahead for Carlos Sainz if he could keep the momentum up.
Now, speaking of entertaining, might not be too entertaining in terms of who's going to claim the top step of the podium throughout the season, but like we mentioned, some great battles all throughout the rest of the field, not being completely settled right up until the checkered flag. Plenty of great racing outside of just the two Red Bull cars in first and second place. Fernando Alonso, George Russell, and Oscar Piastri in particular had a great battle. Three drivers from three different teams there. Starting on the last lap, Russell got around Piastri for P7, so that denies our own Joe Samaniego a pick 7th point, but it secures it for Matthew, Jackson, and myself. So we'll check out that leaderboard later on in the show, I guess. But Joe, let's go to you on that note here. Which driver impressed you the most, and whose stock do you think might be whose stock do you think might be rising or falling among those drivers in the top of the midfield, rather?
I gotta say, for me, in the midfield, out of those drivers, Fernando Alonso, I feel his stock is going up more and more. After last year, I think some people were curious, can Aston Martin have another good car to keep up with everybody? So overall, I think they've been checking that box. Lance Stroll, much better start compared to last year when he had the issues. When you're looking at what Fernando Alonso is doing qualifying-wise, Ferrari has stepped up, so they're going to be really hard. McLaren, they're up there compared to last year where they had a slow, horrible start. So I think Fernando Alonso, with his age and experience, he could really keep bringing Aston Martin up towards the front. Oscar Piastri, this is a race where last year he was on the front row on the After Dark show. Everyone was convinced that he and Max Verstappen could collide at turn one. They didn't. Oscar Piastri fell back. And again, Oscar Piastri just didn't seem to have much going on compared to his teammate Lando Norris at this track. So I feel his stock's going down a little bit, especially when you were considering earlier in the year, Oscar Piastri, he's still pretty close to Lando in the standings. And I felt folks were looking at him as near equal, maybe challenging. I think this weekend, Lando Norris asserted himself again. He's the number one driver. You could still go out, race him hard, but I think Oscar Piastri, out of those drivers, I feel stock has went down a little bit in his capabilities of challenging Lando.
Yeah, I know my answer may surprise everyone, but the driver I'm most impressed to start the season is Sergio Perez, and the reason why I say this is look where he's been last season. All the pressure and all the reports in the media that Sergio Perez could potentially be out of a seat in Formula One. We thought he wouldn't even make it through the end of 2023 season, but he did, and all of us pretty much, we're in agreement that Sergio would probably be replaced at some point later in the 2024 season because he's not able to match Max Verstappen's pace in the Red Bull, but to get a second, a fifth, and a second to start off the season, not really put a wheel wrong. I think that's really good for Checo. I don't know if the, whatever happens the rest of the season can be good enough for him to keep his seat in 2025. But right now he's as cool as a cucumber and showing everyone that he can still contribute to this Red Bull team and the constructors. And maybe if Max has another off day or whatever, or another retirement, maybe Checo will be in a position to still win. And we still have quite a handful of street circuits this year, and people like to call him the king of the streets. So I do think there could be some great tracks for Sergio Perez to get a win later on this season. I think he's so far in 2024, he's handling the pressure extremely well, better than the driver who's disappointed me, which is Daniel Ricciardo. Not going to go into too much into him right now because we're going to talk about it a little later in the show.
Well, he's not quite Mark Webber because he's never actually challenged Max Verstappen for a championship over the course of a full season, but which Webber did in 2010, arguably with his then teammate Sebastian Vettel. But I completely agree with you, Kobe. I think aside from Australia, which was a bit of a downer, and you can believe him, to whatever degree you want to. Of course, Checo was on record saying that he thought Sainz would have won that race anyway, even if Verstappen hadn't had the engine problem. So maybe that was a track that didn't quite suit the Red Bull as much. Who knows? But to be, have a clean sweep of second place finishes aside from that, pretty good start to the year for Checo. Again, who knows who's going to get that seat at Red Bull next year. Who knows if Max Verstappen's still going to be around, because we might have some rumors about him looking for an early buyout to Mercedes, or some drama in the higher-ups over at RBR here and behind the scenes. It's way too early to know how exactly 25 grid is going to look here in whatever it is here, 11 months when we come time to start that part of that brand new season there. But Checo absolutely, I think, is a driver that you have to give a lot of credit to for his start to the year. Now let's move a little bit further down the grid even and talk about one of the more out-of-control battles in this race. It was for 10th place between Yuki Tsunoda, Nico Hülkenberg, Lance Stroll, Valtteri Bottas, and a key pit stop being a part of all that. They all entered the pits at once, along with Logan Sargent. Yuki came out ahead of the Williams. Lance Stroll and the pit crew made the difference. He ended up getting the final point on offer in the race with a P10 finish and a big cheer from his home Japanese crowd. And that team celebrated its second points finish this year. Now, Kobe, with all the racing we saw at Suzuka, does this bring you some hope that we can still have some good racing throughout the field when you look past the two Red Bulls?
I certainly think at other parts of the field, especially in the midfield, we can definitely see some great battles in Formula One this year. But I think what everyone really wants to see, is a battle at the front of the field. So we're not expecting the Max Verstappen victory every single race. Mine's the, I guess what I want to say, an early Christmas gift in Australia. That Max didn't win, so it was completely wide open. Yeah, but it was really nice to see some of the great racing we saw at Suzuka. Hopefully, we'll see more great racing at other tracks throughout the season. But at the end of the day, I think people just really want a battle at the front of the field. But unfortunately, it looks like they're going to have to wait until 2025 to get that, or even 2026. Who knows? We don't really know what's going to happen with the Formula One pecking order moving forward.
I do think this brings hope, especially for some key races. I'm looking at Baku street course, Spa-Francorchamps, Monza, where you have some of these older tracks. Granted, Baku's a newer one, but the long straights on that unique street course just plays to where this car seems to do really good when it comes to the competition. Because at Suzuka, we only had one DRS zone. That was the front stretch. But throughout the lap, we saw battles across, including Yuki Tsunoda making some great moves on the outside of the S's. Very impressive. Outside of turn one, George Russell, a couple others. We saw some great moves all around throughout this race, and I was very much excited to see all those cars coming to pit road at once. This looked like something from stock car race in NASCAR, where the pit crew, you saw the video where Yuki got in, got out ahead of everybody else. That is the kind of action we see IndyCar, sometimes NASCAR, but F1 really we don't, because you don't see a group of cars pitting under green conditions. This was just phenomenal. I was just loving this battle and seeing Yuki fight with the other drivers. I would love to see this more throughout the year, because even if we still have the Red Bulls just controlling the front two positions, this was just very entertaining, I think, for the fans, especially someone that is just thinking, okay, my favorite driver's not going to win. Hey, there's a lot of battles throughout the track. This was really great. Let's see what happens on some of those key tracks I mentioned.
Well, a couple of drivers I think were hoping to be a part of those battles, but who had a horrible day, didn't even make it through halfway through the first lap, would be Alex Albon and Daniel Ricciardo. Albon contacted Ricciardo. Both of them crashed out, bringing out the red flag to repair the tire barriers. Now, Albon's car is being sent back to the Williams factory for repair. They are optimistic that they can get that chassis ready in time for the Chinese Grand Prix, but it has certainly been a rough two-race weekend, rather, with Logan Sargent and Alex Albon both crashing cars. Of course, Sargent had the off in FP1 as well. Now, last year, it looked like Albon was taking Williams back towards the top of the midfield here with some very strong runs, I think outperforming what his car was capable of and bringing that team up to a 7th-place finish in the Constructors. Sargent, of course, was still learning. It was his rookie year. Ended up picking up a point towards the end of the season at Coda. But, Joe, we look at where this team is now. Does it feel like they're sliding backwards? Maybe that P7 Constructors money didn't help as much as we thought it would.
I do feel like they are sliding backwards. Right now, no points. And then the last couple of race weekends with these crashes and the contact and the cars being damaged, and it's just been disastrous PR for Williams, for their fans, not motivating as well. And this weekend, Alex Albon going out so early, that is just heartbreak for that team. Overall, I think this team has to feel like we got to get something going in the right direction, because that's the big thing with Williams. Right now, people were thinking, hey, this new company that was owning it, they're going to take us further and further forward. Now it's not happening. So maybe it's not just all Logan Sargent. A little bit of Alex Albon, 2 weekends in a row with incidents on the track. I think this is Williams falling backwards and backwards. And overall, Williams, I think, have to be careful, because we know, now everyone knows, they don't exactly have a spare chassis available this kind of weekend. I think they're going to be struggling in China the next round.
Yeah, it's been very surprising to see how Williams has started off the 2024 season. Throughout the 2023 season, we really expected, to see Williams pick it back up, and truly get back into contention. And now it seems like Williams has taken multiple steps, and they're back to the team that they were, a few years ago when they were back markers and all of that. And I don't understand what the problem is with Williams now, but for their sake, I hope they can pick it back up and get things right, because Williams is one of the historic Formula One teams, and people want to see those legacy teams do so well. And for them to be this unprepared, to have all these things going wrong within the team, this is not good at all. And it's still surprising to see to look at the constructors right there and see where they are. I certainly expected a lot more than that. I think Williams is basically running how we all expected to see Haas do this year.
Yeah, just apologies to you, Joe and Kobe. I missed this when we were checking the graphics at the start. Haas do have 4 points. They picked up a couple to start the year, so I guess minus 137. The difference to Red Bull, of course, way too far back to make a difference in running for the actual prize there. But they are P7 ahead of a few teams that are yet to score points this year, and of course Williams is one of them. So we'll keep an eye on that, and hopefully things can get headed in the right direction for Williams as the season goes on. Although there's really nowhere to go but up at this point, with not even having a spare chassis available for the first few rounds of the year. We understand that might be coming, but in the meantime, this is the one thing they can't afford to have happen, is their 2 drivers going off track and causing them even more crash damage. So hopefully Logan and Alex can get that under control and not have any of those issues in China. Now, let's move on to talk about Daniel Ricciardo here, the other driver that was part of that incident on the opening lap. It looks like the Daniel Ricciardo from his time at McLaren, no points. And besides the team orders in Bahrain, Ricciardo, of course, finished ahead of Tsunoda, but there were no points on the line with how far back the 2 RB teammates were there. Now, there are some rumors that Liam Lawson would potentially be in the running to replace Ricciardo. Those have been denied. But then again, you know how ruthless the Red Bull Racing program is. Look at what happened to Nick de Vries just last year when Ricciardo replaced him. Ricardo is no rookie. He has success that he can fall back on from many years ago. But as of right now in 2024, he is not delivering where he needs to be. So, Joe, from being the favorite to replace Checo Perez in 25, potentially in the minds of a lot of people, to now being the driver most likely to get replaced mid-season himself, does Daniel Ricciardo need to step it up and not only score points, but also be ahead of a teammate that he's got far more experience than in Yuki Tsunoda?
Easily, he has to step it up, and I think it's more than just a Red Bull, Racing Bull team that are saying you need to step it up. I think there's a lot of fans, especially Daniel Ricciardo fans, out there that are just wondering, okay, should your next move be in Formula One? Should it be in another series like overseas, United States, maybe IndyCar? Because at the end of the day, Daniel Ricciardo, especially after Mexico last year where he had a points finish, everyone thought he's back. This year, nothing. And the car, Yuki Tsunoda, 2 points finishes. Really, if it wasn't for Bahrain, he would be perfect in when it comes to finishing ahead of Daniel Ricciardo. This race weekend, we thought it was going to be much closer because the two of them were starting pretty much 10th, 11th, but it didn't last that long. I feel this race was a little bit where you could place the blame on that crash on either Ricciardo or Albon. But at the end of the day, Daniel Ricciardo, I just feel his time is coming up towards the end of his F1 career. Because if he can't get the job done here with Racing Bulls, where the car is capable of getting points as Yuki's demonstrated, he needs to do that. Considering all the rumors where he's going to go to Red Bull at this pace, they're not going to promote him over Sergio Perez. Perez is looking really good. So where does this leave Ricciardo when you got other drivers waiting? I think he's going to be out of F1 if he doesn't step up.
Yeah, and by out of F1, Joe, I assume you mean out of F1 for good, with no point of coming back, because that's what I'm thinking. I don't know what happened between last year and now with Daniel Ricciardo, because we all know about this test session he ran, and then Red Bull was so impressed. They're like, we have got to bring Daniel Ricciardo back, and then there seemed to be a clear path for him to get back to the Red Bull senior team, so he could be Max Verstappen's teammate. And to see how this has started this year for Daniel Ricciardo, I think a lot of people had greater expectations for him, especially, he's struggling to match Yuki Tsunoda. And we really thought that, that would be the other way around, with Yuki struggling to match Daniel Ricciardo. And I do think that these next few races of him are going to be very, very important, especially with all the rumors we're hearing in the media that he may not make it to the midpoint of the year, that he could get, kicked out just like that, when it seemed like Sergio Perez was the one on the hot seat. It's now looking like Daniel Ricciardo's on the hot seat. And it just goes to show you once again, how ruthless, this Red Bull program can be, and just how ruthless sports can be in general. And Ben, I remember I heard you repeat this recently on a show, a quote that I say, "What have you done for me lately?" That's how it is in this business.
Yeah, I mean, and of course, Daniel Ricciardo, I think, is still capable on his best day. I mean, even, his time in McLaren obviously did not go very well overall, but he did get that surprise win, and that surprise 1-2 for the team at Monza with Lando Norris. So I think, it's very interesting. Like you said, Kobe, I feel like the pace should still be there. Daniel Ricciardo should still know how to drive a Formula One car, but for whatever reason, he just has not been able the last several seasons to match where he was at the prime of his career when he was the Red Bull teammate to Max Verstappen, and arguably the number one, because Max was in a similar position to where Yuki is now, still, wasn't a rookie, obviously, by the time he got promoted, and was obviously very quickly winning his first ever race with that team. But, he's gone from being a leader at a team that featured Max Verstappen to being a potential replacement to get that spot back to now. I think unless, he has an incredible turnaround, probably this is going to be his last stop in Formula One racing, and we'll see what the future might hold for him. Now, another team that's having a disappointing start is, of course, Mercedes. They are fourth in the Constructors, a far fall from where they were, winning 8 consecutive Constructors titles at the start of the Turbo Hybrid era, and they're barely hanging on to that. They're only 1 point ahead of one of the teams they supply engines to, and that's Aston Martin. Had Lance Stroll taken P10, they'd be tied for that spot right now. Kobe, this might sound odd, but does Mercedes need to reevaluate their engineering team that actually builds their cars when you see their customer teams like McLaren and Aston Martin outrunning them? Dare I say, do they even need a leadership change over there?
Well, with Lewis Hamilton leaving for Ferrari, I think that this might be a good time for Mercedes, just completely clean house. I'm not going to say start over completely, but they need to do something, because this is not the same Mercedes that we've seen. And you remember after the Sebastian Vettel era came to an end, we didn't see we didn't really see Red Bull in the same way either, and it took them a while for them to to reevaluate their program and get back to doing what they were doing during the Sebastian Vettel era, which is completely dominating. And I think Mercedes certainly has the capability of becoming that team again that's out there battling for race wins and championships again. But I really do think that they really need to reevaluate everything from the top to bottom. I'm not sure if there's going to be any leadership change. I know there's been rumors in recent years, Toto Wolff could step away from Mercedes. I'm not sure that's going to happen anytime soon, but when you look at how far this team has fallen, I definitely think some changes are really needed. No better time to make these changes when Lewis Hamilton is going to be leaving the team, so they can just completely reevaluate the whole program.
I agree, Kobe. It's so interesting to say that Mercedes needs to have a leadership change potentially, or have the engineering team change. But at the level and the expectation they put on themselves to go out there, race for wins, race for the Constructor Championship, the drivers, competitive for the Drivers' Championship, they are not there. And this isn't, we had one bad car. We had two cars not capable of getting this done. This is at the point where Lewis Hamilton, you're losing your top driver that brought you a lot of success. Red Bull, they're still on top of it, and it looks like really you don't have anything for the McLaren team. And for Aston Martin, Fernando Alonso, 1 point behind. I think that is something where it really shows that this is not going the right direction. This isn't, well, they were uncompetitive, but they've made some progress here and there. I'm not seeing it. We're not seeing it on the track as well either. Lewis Hamilton still looking winless. This is a good opportunity, as strange as it sounds, to say, okay, we need to take the engineering team, the design team, a new direction, something to get a better understanding of these current regulations, which it just seems Mercedes have not been able to find the kind of success they did before. Toto Wolff leaving Mercedes, I think he would consider that as more of a retirement option. Like, I've done the best. I need to step back, maybe more time away from racing, because Formula One's schedule being now 24 races, 24 weekends on the road around the globe, that is brutal. I don't think he's going to say, I'm going to step down because I can't lead. I think he will do more so as a retirement role, but there's probably going to be other positions out there where they're going to be thinking about, can we bring improvement by keeping you here, or do we need to look elsewhere and hire somebody to bring the outside perspective and hopefully bring Mercedes back? Because right now, if they fall behind Aston Martin and finish behind Aston Martin in the constructors, I think they have to say, we got to make changes, because the success we had is just not producing the results we need to be successful today.
All right, we'll leave it there. The next race for Formula One is, of course, the Chinese Grand Prix in 2 weeks' time on April 21st. And you can expect that to be another After Dark episode with the way the time zones play out. So link in the video description to yesterday's After Dark show. And stay tuned for that in 2 weeks. I'm sure it's going to be another fun one. Before we get into NASCAR, Kobe, I understand we have some breaking news we want to share.
Yeah, some breaking news that just come out just a few minutes ago, like major breaking news, something I did not expect, very shocking. And this is straight from Erebus Motorsport, from the team press release. As you guys have already know, we've been following the Brody Kostecki story and the saga surrounding him and Erebus. And it's really seemed like Brody Kostecki and Erebus, were destined to be divorced, but to everyone's surprise, Brody Kostecki will indeed return to Erebus Motorsport alongside Jack LeBrock as the team heads to New Zealand for the third round of the Supercars Championship. Kostecki will undertake a test day at Winton this week in preparation for Taupo. And then Brody said in a statement that I'm excited to be back behind the wheel again. I needed some time away to prioritize my health. I'm grateful for the support, privacy, and time Betty, Barry, and the team have given me. And Airbus CEO Barry Ryan said Kostecki's return would be a boost heading into the third round of the championship. And Barry Ryan said, on behalf of Betty and the team, we are pleased Brody is ready to drive again. Having Brody back to work alongside Jack as he becomes more familiar with the car will be a positive for the entire team. And Todd Hazelwood, who is set to co-drive for Airbus at the Sandown 500 and Bathurst 1000, filled in for Kostecki at the season open in Bathurst 500 and Australian Grand Prix events. And Barry Ryan concluded, a big thanks to Todd. He performed brilliantly under considerable pressure and scrutiny. So hats off to him. We look forward to having him at the test day this week and back in the seat for the Enduros later in the year. So Joe, I guess I'll start with you on this one. Like, what are your thoughts about Brody Kostecki making a shock return? Because a lot of people really expected, that this relationship had run its course, and there's no way that you're going to see Brody drive again. Even Cam Waters, who was racing the Truck Series event at Martinsville, he had a media availability earlier in the week, and he briefly talked about Brody, and he said, "Oh, Brody's going to have the year off and all of that." And look at this now. Now Brody is returning. So, Joe, I'm just flabbergasted by this.
Me too, especially considering everything that has essentially happened with that team. They lost a major sponsorship. Everything was indicating that we were just waiting for the official announcement. Brody is not coming back. And then essentially the dominoes will fall when it comes to silly season in the Repco Supercar Series. So this is hugely surprising. I would say probably one of the big surprises of the year, especially for supercars that this later, granted, they're still early in the season, but we've done a couple of rounds. It just looked like it was not going to happen. Brody's going to have his word cut out if he's going to be at all contending for a championship, which I think is just more bring the wins, attract the sponsorships, try to rebuild. But it's going to be really interesting as more details come out. And I think the one thing a lot of people are going to be curious about, will we hear rumors about what was this all about, what happened, and why did it get resolved this way? This is definitely not the end of the story.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't follow supercars as closely as you two do, so I don't have too much to add there. But I've been casually keeping up with it, of course, and seeing what you guys have to report on Grid tonight. And from just kind of an outsider's vantage point, it certainly looked like irreconcilable differences between those two parties. And of course, Brody has some history with NASCAR, even going back to his days running K&N East about a decade ago, and then coming back to run the IMS road course this year. And you see what obviously SVG is doing. Cam Waters, like you mentioned, Kobe, running a truck race Martinsville Friday night. We'll have more on that on the Encore show tomorrow. You maybe thought Brody might look for an early out here to come to NASCAR and follow in SVG's footsteps, so to speak. But I guess for supercars fans, certainly great to hear that the two appear to have put their differences aside, and Brody's going to be back here because, like we talked about on the show before as well, supercars seems to be reminds me of the open wheel invasion from the early to mid 2000s. It seems like a lot of talents kind of flirting with NASCAR right now, and that's great for us, but maybe not so great for the Supercar Series to be losing all of their big stars at once. So glad for the series' sake that Brody's going to be back.
Yes, it's definitely a big positive that the defending series champion is going to be back on the grid. And just the thought of the defending series champion not being on the grid all year long, that was something that, very disappointing to supercars fans, everyone in supercars in general. Now for Brody to come back, that's a big deal, a big boost for the series. And like you're saying, Joe, it's going to be interesting to see if we're going to hear more details come out, in the days and weeks ahead about this situation. It's still a very odd situation, that a lot of us still don't really understand what was happening, because like I was saying, we really thought that this would be the end of Brody and Erebus, but now all of a sudden they're back together again. Unfortunately for Brody, he's not going to be able to defend his title because of so many races that he's already missed, but I think he could potentially elevate that team where we think it can be, because last year, he was battling with Shane Van Gisbergen all year. Brody had some really great drives all throughout the season. And it seems like with Jack LeBron and Todd Hazelwood during these first few races, it seemed like that team has taken a step back over the offseason. But we know how talented Brody is. I think getting Brody in their cars, and like no disrespect to Todd Hazelwood and Jack LeBron, but Brody Kostecki is on a completely different level when it comes to driving talent. And we know for sure he's going to get the best out of that Erebus Chevrolet Camaro. So we'll be able to see where their program is at in 2024 when he gets back, but behind the wheel of the car. And got a comment there from Adam Limmery saying, awesome news for Brody. Yeah, really great to see him back on the track. I'm really glad that he's not going to spend the entire year on the sidelines. It's going to be interesting to see what he's going to be able to do when he gets back on track in New Zealand at the next race.
And a friendly reminder to everyone, as more news potentially breaks out on this, Grid tonight, Kobe, they'll probably most likely have delays if there's more breaking news regarding this big shocking news that Brody Kenseth is back in the Supercar Series. Ben, let's switch over to the NASCAR Cup Series. A beautiful day for a cookout at Martinsville, especially for the famous hot dogs there. Hendrick Motorsports for the cookout 400. They brought 1,500 plus employees to the weekend as all the cars had a ruby red scheme to celebrate the 40th anniversary. Looked like it was going to be a good day. Kyle Larson won stage 1, bringing joy to the employees, but then Logano took stage 2. Stage 3, it looks like Chase Elliott was going to deliver that. He brought out the lead, but then William Byron, and he seems to be the driver everyone's going to be talking about throughout the year, essentially went out there, got the win, and one of the big things, Byron breaks a tie with Denny Hamlin for the most wins in 2024. Considering the last time at Martinsville, Byron had a horrible day. Nearly missed the championship 4 because it was that bad. He didn't get a win in that round. How big of a confidence boost is this for him and his championship goals with Hendrick?
Yeah, it's a massive confidence boost. Obviously, it was a huge weekend for Hendrick. I don't know if you caught this on the broadcast. I know we only mentioned it a couple of times, but it was their 40th anniversary of that win with Jeff Bodine all those years ago that really, in the words of everybody at Hendrick, is the only reason we're talking about them today, because they were really that close to closing up shop and, just saying, forget it, maybe this isn't for us. And then they went out and won that race. And as they say, the rest is history over at Hendrick Motorsports. And a great, great day for not just William Byron, obviously, but the entire organization. 1, 2, 3 finish there. You see with Larson and Elliott, Bowman up in the top 10 as well. But for Byron in particular, we were talking about this in our own private chat as well, but I think a lot of people have to start putting some respect on Byron's name if they haven't already. We talk about Kyle Larson, a Cup champion, Chase Elliott, a Cup champion, and being threats to, win week in and week out and being top drivers at Hendrick Motorsports. William Byron right now looks like he might be the top driver at Hendrick Motorsports. Obviously, Chase Elliott and Alex Bowman had injuries last year. They're trying to come back and recover from that. And Kyle Larson, of course, is still a threat any given Sunday. But William Byron, I think if you had to pick a favorite out of those 4 drivers right now, the way he's driving, he looks absolutely unstoppable. And like you mentioned, Joe, very important playoff placement for this track when we come back in the fall in determining who's going to make a championship for. So obviously still very, very early. Live races still to play out. But if you're a William Byron fan, I think you have to be feeling pretty confident about how well your guy's running at the moment.
Yeah, he's been running really well. Martinsville, after last year, I just thought, okay, he might be the 3rd, maybe even the 4th place Hendrick car today. That was not the case, especially that pit stop. He just seemed to have it all together, working. William Byron victorious, 3 wins already this season. And one of the big things, nobody in the top 10 in overtime made a pit stop really besides Denny Hamlin. When that overtime caution came out, essentially for John Hunter Nemechek, I thought we're going to see several cars make pit stops, or maybe everybody, but nobody. Denny Hamlin did. I was thinking about it, Ben, even if we saw everyone pit except the 4 Hendricks car, I'm convinced Hendricks would have known, okay, stack the first 2 rows with 2 each so you don't risk not winning the race at all. Was everyone staying out really the best call? Because it just seemed like there wasn't a whole lot of options, at least for going for the win.
Yeah, I mean, it's always tough when you're in a situation like that, and so you got to factor in you only have to hang on for 2 laps, which in Martinsville is just a little bit more than a mile with how short the track is. So, I mean, ultimately, the guys that stayed out came out on top here. Denny Hamlin got shuffled back quite a bit, so you can look at that as a mistake on Hamlin's part, but at the same time, if everybody comes in the pits, it looks like a smart move. Maybe if he stays out, I mean, you can play all sort of different hypotheticals there. You don't really know until it actually comes time for that decision to be made. And oftentimes, if you're the only one that does something different, It's why being the leader is such a difficult position to be in because you don't know what's going to happen. Now, in the case of Hendrick here, I don't know if their crew chiefs were communicating with one another. I assume they probably were coming into that last pit stop decision that needed to be made because you've got 3 cars up there that can kind of act like a buffer, especially now with the choose rule and determining where you want to place them. I know people aren't a huge fan of team orders, but it was an option available to Hendrick if they wanted to try to strategize a little bit and at least make sure that somebody from that team brought the win home on a weekend like this of all weekends in particular. So, hey, I mean, it certainly worked out for them. It's hard to argue it not being the best call with how everything played out.
The way everything played out, I gotta agree. It seemed like the best call, and I'm curious if other teams have something like this planned out, like a Joe Gibbs Racing, where if they know, okay, you got 4 cars in the top 10, late race caution for overtime. Is this something as a factor? It was really interesting to see how this all played out. Denny Hamlin didn't exactly make much progress with the overtime. I think everyone was just really stuck to hoping maybe you get some crashes or mayhem during the restart. We didn't see that. And overall, I gotta say I was pretty impressed with this race. We did see passes for the lead positions throughout the field. Originally, 3 cautions for incidents on the track. Then, of course, we had the 2 stage cautions. Tire wear wasn't much of an issue. We saw the track rubbering, including the outside groove. I'm starting to feel like this tire's become a little bit more unpredictable week in and week out, especially in the short tracks. The last stage, we saw green flag pit stops and strategy really playing out, including Daniel Suarez, who made the last pit stop with 57 laps to go, had the freshest tires. I was really curious to see if he was going to climb up through the field. Was this the kind of racing we want to see at Martinsville, Ben?
Yes and no. I mean, I think the package is trending in the right direction, but I think we still have a bit of a ways to go. I think the most notable example from what I saw on my timeline, I was trying to keep one eye on the race and one eye on South Carolina, Iowa. By the way, Joe, congratulations to your Gamecocks on a national championship there and the undefeated perfect season. But I think that there's obviously been progress that's been made. But the most obvious example of the frustration was when Denny Hamlin couldn't get around Austin Dillon, and Austin Dillon had an absolutely dreadful day. That crew chief change didn't seem to have any immediate effect with how slow that car was in this race today. We'll see if it helps going forward. I think RCR certainly. I mean, you want to talk about a team that might need an overhaul. Kyle Busch down there in 16th, Austin Dillon, I think he ended up 34th if my memory serves me right. Yeah, there you go. So, but again, the fact that Dillon was that slow today and it was still difficult for the race leaders to get around him at one stage of the race, I think maybe says something about where the next gen car is still on the short tracks. So again, I mean, not a terrible race by any means. From what I saw, I think, certainly improvements have been made. But I think that, the whole thing, I mean, we got very lucky at Bristol with the tire wear being such a important variable and crazy variable as it was. I think that was beyond anybody's wildest expectations, what we might see there. Obviously didn't see anything like that today, but I think what we have seen, we've made some progress, but we still have a ways to go in terms of perfecting the short track package with these next gen cup cars.
Still have work on the package, on the short track. I see, Adam, it was quite a Martinsville race.
I think I'd say quiet actually, but
quiet.
Quiet. Quiet. I think that's a good word for it. I mean, up until the very end there, when John Hunter Nemechek got into the wall, it's 2 weeks in a row that we've thought we were set free, and we ended up getting an overtime finish. But I think that's a good word for it. We think of Martinsville as a track where you see a lot of beating and banging and cautions breed cautions, and like we saw at Bristol, even with all the craziness of tires going down and how much wear there was, a really clean third stage up until the very end there, like I just mentioned.
And on the After Dark show, you predicted it was going to be pretty much a clean first, second stage. Really, Christopher Bell, his issue was the only caution early on. Overall, I was pleased with this race. I feel I don't want Martinsville to be too chaotic, where I don't remember the exact year where it was under the lights and you had essentially everyone wrecking across the finish line. I believe that was the fall race. Can't exactly remember, but I feel like I don't want a Martinsville race where it's just too chaotic, bumper cars. I know there's fans that love the drama of that kind of racing. But I sort of like, especially the green flag pit stop, seeing the different strategies.
Yeah.
I think the hard part is just finding that balance of, okay, we got something where everyone is just bumping into each other because everyone's that great, or you got something where aero push. I know they're still shifting. A lot of folks feel like that is one of the reasons why we're not exactly having that great of a race as well.
I love seeing green flag pit stops at Bristol and Martinsville. I mean, that's something I never thought we'd see as a kid. But that's, credit to the drivers for keeping it clean. And I guess there's a silver lining to the package. You're seeing things like that play out naturally. I guess we as fans really don't know what we want, right? Because, we're tired of the carnage. We're tired of things not being able to play out naturally. And then it happens. And then we say, well, the package still needs some work. You can't really pass. You can't really race each other hard. And then they start racing each other hard and they start wrecking and they say, well, we don't like this, so it means just a constant dichotomy of not knowing what we want there, I guess. But, I think there's certainly, like I said, we're in a pretty solid place right now. But that doesn't mean we can't continue to strive to make improvements to what we have with this package. And I think it was 2017, the race you were talking about, Joe. I think that should have been probably Chase Elliott's first career win. When Denny Hamlin got into him. I think everybody forgets that Chase Elliott was pretty forceful with Brad Keselowski to take the lead in the first place. Brad wasn't too happy about that, but that was certainly a night where everybody was mad at everybody, I think, by the end of it.
Everyone was mad at everyone. One of the things I was thinking too, especially talk about green flag pit stop, especially we've seen it at Bristol. Bristol and Martinsville, they both used to have two pit roads, one the front, one the back. Martinsville followed North Wilkesboro, putting it around the corners. I'm curious if we had something of this package and if Martinsville decide, hey, let's go back, just do what Bristol's doing now. They still have two pit roads, so green flag pit stops, much shorter time on pit road. I feel that could be a really interesting dynamic to the race. Now, of course, the likelihood of Martinsville changing that up, I don't know if that's going to work, but overall,
Joe, by the time they change that up, we're going to have a package that is just nothing but cautions-free cautions, and it won't even matter. That's always how it seems to go, right?
That could be it. And then they'll just bring it back to old pit road, because at the end of the day, it's just one of those deals where you could change this, but then something else will change. Because like you say, this package, you're going to keep evolving it over the years, try to make it better for everyone, especially the TV audience, those ratings. Now, of course, one of the big things, everyone's talking about Hendrick Motorsports drivers finishing the top 10, all four of them. And of course, they're all Chevrolet drivers. But when you look at the rest of the results bin, it's not exactly that nice for Chevy. You only had Chastain 14th, Kyle Busch 16th, and Carson Hocevar 17th, the only other ones in the top 20, compared to Ford. 4 cars in the top 10, equaling Chevrolet, with 2 different teams, Penske and, yes, Stewart-Haas Racing, which we talked about yesterday. Could they get more than one? They certainly responded. And then you had Todd Gilliland. Great race all day long, even after a penalty. Chris Buescher, a top 20 as finisher. Of course, RFK, they're rebounded. And then Toyota, 2 cars in the top 10. And then, of course, 4 from 11th to 20th position. So I got to ask, could the bigger picture point a different picture where at the end of the day, Chevrolet is very dependent on Hendrick Motorsports for the wins compared to Toyota and Fords, which are still winless?
Yeah, it's an interesting question that you're posing there, Joe, because on the one hand, I think, RCR, for all their flaws, still have Kyle Busch, who I think is still liable to win any given Sunday. He can do magical things with a race car that very few other people on this planet can. And he was right there, part of that photo finish that was won by another Chevrolet driver, not from Hendrick Motorsports, and Daniel Suarez and Trackhouse Racing. And, I wouldn't put a win past Ross Chastain later this year either. But I think, we talked the last couple of years, and, even back a few years before that, I think Hendrick around the time 2018 with new Camaro coming in, I think it was kind of a down year for them. Hendrick has certainly bounced back since then. They are the clear number 1 team over at Chevrolet. Like I said, RCR still has Kyle Busch, and Trackhouse has Ross Chastain, who, made a championship 4 2 years ago. If he had made a championship 4 last year, we'd be talking about him as a Cup champion right now. So I think there is still momentum building over at Trackhouse, and I think there's still momentum building over at Spire. I think Carson Hocevar, had a very solid run today, and 17th place, not a bad result for where that team is at the moment. We've seen Corey LaJoie. He didn't have a good day today, to be quite frank, but he's had some solid runs with that Spire car in the not too distant past as well. So I think there is momentum building over at Chevy, but bigger picture, it might still be that our other teams have some work to do in light of the fact that Hendrick is running so successfully right now.
Yeah, the other teams, they seem to have some work to do. Dan Suarez, that win. Atlanta, it's almost pretty much a super speedway. Ross Chastain, I think, is still capable of getting wins. It just seems like this was just not exactly going his way. And we got to remember, his biggest claim to fame at Martinsville was riding the wall. John Hunter Nemechek did that, but with all the wrong intentions. Of course, the brake went out. That set up for the overtime. I think Chevrolet, it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the next few races, where the other teams stack up, especially the 1.5 mile ovals. Granted, Texas, I believe, is the next 1.5 mile oval. It's not exactly going to be that great of an indicator, but it'll be really interesting to see how they could respond. One driver, one team I felt responded positively. Bubba Wallace came home 4th place, and his teammate, Tyler Reddick, 7th place. Both pretty quiet today. Bubba Wallace was always up towards the front. And really, the pit crews did not blunder this race like in the past race weekends. And all season, really, 23-11, not making a lot of noise, but good performances. Of course, Circus of America, Las Vegas, the pit crews, they got the job done. Both drivers have been finishing in the top 15 in every race since the Circus of America race. So how close is 23-11 been to winning a race this season?
Yeah, they're not going to endure, I think. We talked on the After Dark show yesterday about Bubba Wallace, taking a step forward at this track. And obviously, Tyler Reddick's a very capable driver as well, 2-time Xfinity Series champion and multi-time race winner in Cup in his own right. So, I think they are certainly close to winning a race this year. I wouldn't put a win past either driver here. I'm trying to think of some tracks where that win might come. Bubba Wallace had a strong run at Texas last year, and Talladega obviously is always a threat on the super speedways, and I think Tyler Reddick really takes a liking to the 1.5 miles, and Kansas could be a good opportunity for both of them as well. So yeah, certainly some opportunities coming up in the not too distant future for 23-11 to park it in victory lane. There's no doubt.
And Texas is the next one for the Cup Series, the Auto Trader Echo Park Automotive 400. One team, Ben, that is not going anywhere. Many are wondering what's going on, honestly. Kaulig Racing, 27th, 28th place finish today. And this team, I feel, has gone from a potential contender rising up, especially with Justin Haley, to maybe a sinking ship, where really only the road courses so far and Daytona, the super speedway, they seem to be somewhat contenders. Of course, AJ Allmendinger in the road courses. They have a partnership with Trackhouse, especially for Shane Van Gisbergen. But at Circus of America, 20th place. Issues at Circus of America ruined his day. This team has said they are there to go trophy hunting. But is there hope that Kaulig Racing, they can make some improvements? Or do they need to look at some changes for improvements to be a serious Cup team in the series?
Joe, this might be a hot take, but I'm going to say it. I think Kaulig should seriously consider selling their charters. And I don't say that lightly, because I know that they have brand ambitions over that team. I think they've built something very great. AJ Allmendinger has been a huge part of that since the very beginning, when the team first started to come into their own. He got them that win at the Indy Road Course. I've got the diecast right behind me, actually, from when they were just an open team, and really looked like they were taking some steps forward. AJ went full-time last year, got a win at the Roval, but ultimately they didn't run as strong as I think they would have liked. Now he's back in Xfinity, but their Xfinity program as well. I think it's not terrible by any means, but it certainly doesn't look like the weekly threat to win that they were the last couple of years. And then on the Cup side, like we mentioned, I mean, Joe, we posed the question, Jackson talking to us yesterday on After Dark, could Josh Williams get into the top 20? And I said, they're going to be lucky to break into the top 30 with how they've been running lately. And they did at least clear that bar today. So, credit where credit's due there. It's something at least. But, for a team whose motto is trophy hunting, 27th and 28th is not where you really want to be running. So I think that some major changes need to be made over at Colleague. If they don't turn it around soon, I would say, honestly, with what charters are going for nowadays, you keep hearing Junior Motorsports. I don't know if that would be a potential buyer, because Junior went on his podcast when they bought their charters for $10 million and said, we're not going to be racing in the Cup Series if they're going for that much. And Live Fast just sold their Spires, I think, for like $40 million this offseason. So the market, it feels like it keeps rising higher and higher every time. I feel like it's inevitable at some point that it's just going to crash. But with what they're going for right now, this might be the perfect time to sell. And then, hey, use that money like you just did at COTA, putting AJ Allmendinger number 13, field an open car again. You've had some success before. You've won a race as an open car. Your partner, Trackhouse, won a race with an open car with SVG at Project 91. Use the money you make from that, reinvest it into your Xfinity program, get that program back to being a championship contender, and then go have fun on the road courses, trophy hunting with SVG and AJ Allmendinger. That's what I think they should seriously consider the merits of at this point. I know that it's great to see how far that program has come. The fact that they're even in the Cup Series now with 2 charters is a testament to the hard work that Matt Colleague and Chris Rice have put in. I don't want to discredit that entirely. But if this is going to be the weekly story for Colleague Racing, and more importantly, if their Xfinity teams can't pick up the slack a little bit and turn back into weekly top 10 and top 5 contenders, I mean, Josh Williams in particular, I don't think it's been the start to the year that he was hoping for coming over to this team either. I think it's a solution that they have to look at.
I think I have to agree with you, because at the end of the day, I feel the Cup Series team is just taking away some of the resources from the organization, and they just don't seem to have anything going in the right direction for them. The way I see it, some of the mistakes from last year, especially AJ Allmendinger missing out on qualifying for Richmond, and then what they said, well, Richmond is one of those tracks he's not exactly the best at, so we're going to miss Richmond. And at the time, he was near the top 16 in points potential playoffs. Now, I would be shocked. The only way that could happen is if they win Talladega or Daytona, one of those tracks. Overall, I feel Colleague Racing, and like you said, we know they've built up something big with their motto, we're going trophy hunting. I do think they need to figure out, okay, we need to make some drastic changes if we want to continue trophy hunting, because right now, that trophy's nowhere in sight. If they were to sell the team and just, okay, we're an open team, look at the landscape currently. I mean, right now, most races have 37 cars, still short of the 40 field maximum. I'm not concerned that they're not going to qualify for a race besides the Daytona 500, which that'll be next year. But if they were to sell the charter, assuming that'll be something that'll take effect the following year, really reinvest in the Xfinity Series. And really, if they're a powerhouse in the Xfinity Series, just keep focusing on that, and then maybe do the open races here and there, especially the road course races with AJ Allmendinger. Maybe have some partnerships with Trackhouse for a potential, Project 91 in the future, or more Shane Van Gisbergen. A lot of options out there, but I just feel they cannot continue just this approach, because they're not going anywhere. It just seems like they're going further and further behind.
Yeah, and Joe, to that point, I can already see people in the comments saying, well, Ben, the charter system exists. You can't make any money running open. It's, just a money pit that they're not going to get out of, and it's not worth it at all. I mean, to that, I would say I certainly get where you're coming from, but clearly somebody, Colleague, thinks it's worth it, because they just did it at COTA, and they did it in the past before they even had charters and were exploring a Cup Series program. So, I wish there were more purse money available to be open teams. I think the discrepancy in how much they get as opposed to charter teams is, not nearly enough. And we could talk about that on a whole roundtable show in and of itself. But I think that the opportunity is there. You can go have fun a couple times a year trophy hunting with 2 excellent road course racers that you have as part of your program, and take that money, put it back into Xfinity, go all in there. I think, again, it's an option worth considering. I will say this, Joe, to your point about the playoffs. I think, we've been reminded the last couple of years with how, this injuries and everything, the Owners' Championship's been slightly different from the drivers. Normally, that's not the case in Cup, but I will say this, with Kaulig using a rotation of drivers in that 16 again, if SVG can win a road course race in one of his starts, or Allmendinger, or whoever the case may be, Super Speedway, like you mentioned as well, maybe they get into the Owners' playoffs. I don't think they're going to win them, but it could change the outcome of that championship a little bit and make it worth following again as well. So there's still a little bit of a wild card aspect there, but again, that's another change that I wasn't really sure where they were coming from with that. I think it's much easier to help build a program up when you have, like what we saw with AJ Allmendinger last year, one driver in that car all year to help build that team's chemistry. It's much harder to build that chemistry when you're going from driver to driver, week to week. We don't even know, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we even have the full schedule lined up exactly yet in terms of who is going to be in that car every week, because Ty Dillon's deal was just announced a couple of weeks ago as to what races he was going to run. So I feel like there are still some races where we're not quite sure who's going to be in that car until the entry list comes out, or there might still be some deals being finalized. I don't know. It's just it's a business model that has worked for them so far, but I think it might be time to reevaluate some things over there.
And especially in the Cup Series, I know Josh Williams has a fan following after what happened in Atlanta. The short tracks, that might make sense. But then Ty Dillon, I just don't know about. He's been around for a while, just not have the results there. I almost feel it'll be worth it sticking with somebody that it's an upcoming rookie, invest in him for 2, maybe 3 years, depending on how things go. But this musical chairs of who's driving, it's just not helping out and just not going anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, Ty Dillon's a great guy. I don't want this to be taken the wrong way, but I think his Cup Series stock, at the very least, certainly peaked a long time ago. I don't understand really the thinking behind. I mean, I guess if you want veteran leadership, I think you've got plenty of that in AJ Allmendinger, but maybe Ty provides a little bit of that. I don't know if it's enough to compare to AJ, but I would much rather, to your point, Joe, see Derek Kraus take up some of those starts in that car and use that to gain experience for him in his career, rather than I think it's very unlikely you're going to be trophy hunting with Ty Dillon in the Cup Series with that program in 2024. So again, I think there's certainly you can't take anything away from Kaulig and what they've accomplished so far, but if they want to keep building on that legacy, I think it might be time for some hard conversations over there.
Hard conversations. And of course, NASCAR Cup Series, another race next weekend. It'll be interesting to see what happens. And for the latest, of course, we'll have it on Grid Live pre-race. And if anything, big news before the weekend, Grid Tonight, Kobe Lambeth will be reporting along with Joshua and Matthew and Kobe. This is a very exciting time. First Sunday of April. That means the first week of the 8th annual Grid Ranking.
Yeah, that's right. And it's hard to believe it's been 8 years already. And we're really excited to release week 1 of the Grid Ranking, which comes out on the first Sunday of April every single year. So we're kicking off the 2024 edition tonight for the first time since the final weekend of 2022, when Shane Van Gisbergen led Max Verstappen is not on top of the Grid Ranking. Jorge Martin from MotoGP is leading for the first time in his career, and also for the first time a MotoGP rider is leading week 1. Martin is the second Spaniard to lead the Grid Ranking, and the first since Marc Marquez in 2019. MotoGP is going to Circuit of the Americas next weekend, a track he has yet to win at. So, Joe, does Martin's podium streak continue or end at COTA?
Oh, man. For Martin, Circuits of America, I think he's going to have a really tough weekend because Marc Marquez, 2-time Grid Ranking world champion, has been the king of COTA before. Now he's in a Ducati. I think he's going to be a big contender for the win. Jorge Martin, along with Marc Marquez, you also got to deal with the factory riders. Enea Bastianini is looking great after a dismal 2023 season. And, of course, Pecco Bagnaia, don't count him out yet. So that's going to be a tight battle for the podium. And, of course, there could be other surprises. Aprilia, they have been up there. Last year, we saw Alex Rins get the surprise win in a Honda. I think he's going to have a very tricky weekend to try to claim a podium spot. He is very capable of it. I don't see him making the kind of mistakes like in the past, Kobe, where he would be leading, lose the lead, crash out, or just leading and crash out. I think he's matured a lot since those years. But if he could get a podium finish, that'll be huge for him, and especially if he wants to stay on top of the grid ranking.
Yeah, for sure. It's going to be interesting to see how Jorge Martin does in the Lone Star State. MotoGP goes to the Circuit of the Americas. And I mentioned Marc Marquez. We used to call him the King of Coda. We'll see if Marc Marquez can get a victory on that Ducati bike. And now looking at Max Verstappen from Formula One, last year's grid ranking world champion, he's in 5th place, and he would have been the leader if he didn't retire in Australia. And since Formula One only has a 20-car field, a DNF lowers the score more than in a series like IndyCar, which has 27 cars in the field this year. However, looking at the grid ranking, as you can see, there are no IndyCar drivers yet. That's because IndyCar is not completed. 2 points races are required to be scored in the grid ranking. The Grand Prix of Long Beach is their next race, and then once that takes place, IndyCar will officially be in the grid ranking. Now we're going to bring Ben back on for this one. So Ben, do you sense that IndyCar's slow start allows the momentum and excitement of the new season to fade?
Yeah, I think so. What is it? I think 42 days between race 1 and 2 of the regular season, with a Thermal Club All-Star $1 million, except not really challenge thrown in there, if that's your cup of tea, which it didn't seem to be for too many people. Yeah, I think the enthusiasm's way down for IndyCar. The momentum's way down. The excitement is way down. And the schedule is only a small part of that, but it's a part of it nonetheless. I think, certainly you would want to be maybe not in the heart of your season by April 7th, but have more than one race under your belt if you're a series like IndyCar. I think that, it's, unless you're staggering the calendar so that you're starting it at the very end of March or the beginning of April, which I think is probably a little bit too late, you should definitely have enough races to be scored in our grid ranking at the very least. I think, having this much time off and the only filler for it being a very polarizing new event that didn't seem to win too many people over who were on the fence about it, I think IndyCar's in a really bad place when it comes to momentum and excitement at the moment.
Yeah, I feel I feel like IndyCar, they have taken the excitement of brand new season, whereas St. Pete, Joseph Newgarden, who won the Indy 500 last year, got to win. That excitement level has disappeared, I feel. If you're an IndyCar fan, you're more vested in watching, but even that, as Ben mentioned, it was very polarizing. So some folks, they didn't tune in to the Thermal Club race. Now we're just waiting till Long Beach shows up. This is not how you get people excited for the season. This is not how you get people excited for your series. Overall, I feel IndyCar really should be looking at, okay, how can we improve next year? Because at the end of the day, when you look at IndyCar to the other series, this is some of the best, most competitive racing out there compared to Formula One, other series. I mean, we talked about Alex Palou, quote, dominated, unquote, but he won less than 6 races. For IndyCar standards, that's huge, considering it just seems like everyone has a good shot at winning. But at the end of the day, if people are not watching these races because they're not on the air, well, it's hard to build the excitement up and get fans to watch the series. So I really think IndyCar needs to reevaluate for 2025 how the season starts out and getting more fans watching the races at the stand in front of the screen, whether it's TV screen or computer monitor or your smartphone, tablet. But just getting more eyeballs on the sport is critical, I feel.
Yeah, and it just simply doesn't make any sense that we're going to go 42 days between their first points race and your next points race. I have a feeling if we really wanted to have an all-star race, looking at the dates of the IndyCar schedule, the $1 million challenge / all-star race should have happened on March 10th, and then St. Pete should have happened on March 24th, and then then you go to Long Beach on April the 21st. And I know that's still about a month in between races, but at least it would cut it in half, and it would be a lot better than what we have now. I feel like if you're going to do an exhibition race, it should be either at the very beginning of the season, in the middle of the season, or even even after the championship races. I feel like that would be a better time to have those exhibition races. But when you have all these large gaps in the schedule like this, I really does feel like it kills off all the momentum and excitement for the new season. I'm not saying that IndyCar should be racing, every single weekend or every 2 weeks or something like that. But I really think that in the future that they really need to tighten up the schedule a little bit so we can see the IndyCar series racing more often throughout the year. rather than you have this little tease to start off the season in St. Pete, and then you have this long gap between St. Pete and Long Beach, and then just an exhibition race in between. So we'll have to wait and see what IndyCar does in 2025 moving forward. But I really feel like they need to adjust the schedule moving forward if they want to try to keep the excitement and the momentum going, because it's really hard to just stop for over a month and then try to start up again. And I know everybody's going to be excited for the month of May coming up. So that's when a lot of people are going to be talking about IndyCar a lot more often. And looking at the schedule for next race weekend, we have a Formula E doubleheader at Misano, MotoGP's at Coda, and NASCAR at Texas Motor Speedway. Formula E, 5 races, 5 different winners, and they're coming to a new track. The Misano circuit in Italy is a purpose-built road course, and many anticipate something similar to Portland. Formula E is not going to be using the full circuit. They're going to be using a modified layout with long straights. Ben, considering the comparison to Portland, do you anticipate Formula E having 7 different winners by the end of the next race weekend?
It's certainly possible. I'm going to say we get 1 new winner and 1 repeat winner. So I think we'll have 6 winners in 7 races. I think one of the drivers has won so far. We'll pick up a win in the first race, and we'll get a new winner in the second race. That's my prediction. But again, we could easily have it because of how unpredictable it sounds like this course is going to be. And if it's getting comparisons to Portland, certainly, I could definitely see it happening. But as for my prediction, I'll go with 6 and 7 instead of 7 different ones.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment there. So I'm interested to see how these Formula E cars get along at the Misano circuit. And a lot of people are going to be missing Rome. They're running the Rome E-Prix, but I guess you can't go wrong with Misano. It'll be interesting to see how this race all plays out. In the 2024 grid ranking is officially underway, and we have many weeks to go before we end up crowning the 2024 grid ranking world champion. The same thing can be said for the 2024 Grid Endurance Performance Index, which was revealed a few days ago on Grid Tonight. 5 races are being scored in the EPI this weekend. Get the updated EPI standings for week 2 on Grid Tonight this Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon. With that said, Ben, going to turn over to you for our one shining moment.
Thank you, Kobe. So the one shining moment, one thing that stood out to you from this race weekend on a positive note as we close out the show tonight. Joe, we'll start with you. What is your one shining moment from this weekend?
I would say my one shining moment comes from Formula One, and it would have to go to Yuki Tsunoda. I know a 10th place finish is not exactly something where you'll see a driver that has multiple point finishes throughout his F1 career celebrating over. But he did this in Suzuka in front of his home country, seeing those fans cheering him on his cool down lap, and then the photos of the celebration in that garage. Because we got to remember, this team, this is what a lot of folks call the Red Bull B team. They're not exactly going to be contenders for points. But this weekend, he was a contender all weekend, and he is having a great start to the season. When you compare him to his teammate, I think he's excelling this year, and I think he's going to have a phenomenal year. But to do this in your home country with all the fans there supporting you, cheering you, and the team, they looked like they were just thrilled with everything. Considering one of their cars crashed out, Yuki Tsunoda, that's my one shining moment.
Yeah, that's a great choice, Joe. Really great to see Yuki do well in front of his hometown fans and all of that. And my one shining moment is actually going to come from one of the races that we don't even cover here at Grid Network. I'm very relieved to see Robert Wickens walk away from a very scary crash in Germany. When I heard about the crash, I was like, oh my goodness. It was like I had the fears running through my head, like I'm sure a lot of other people had. And then to hear that he was taken to the hospital and all of that, and then get word from Brian Hurd Autosport, and then Robert Wickens later himself with a message that he's gonna be okay and he's looking forward to getting back in the car. That was a huge sigh of relief for everyone in the racing community, because we know the hard road that Robert Wickens took after that scary crash at Pocono to get back onto the racing track and to adjust to his new normal of driving the cars, with the hand controls and all that, and still, being extremely quick. And now that he's able to, race and travel, outside of the country to race at a track that's been on his bucket list at the Nürburgring circuit, the full course, something that he's always wanted to do in his racing career, and for him to have this scary crash and walk away, that was quite a miracle. I'm very happy that Robert Wickens continues to be with us, and hopefully he'll be back in a race car very soon. It sounds like in the little statement post that he's going to be working towards getting back in a race car.
And great one, Kobe. Certainly great news there. I'd give a one shining moment to Max Verstappen, but that would be old and obvious given that we expected him to bounce back and do this. So I'm going to give a one shining moment again to his teammate right here. Still the best number 2 driver that Max Verstappen has had since he's been the number 1 at Red Bull. For all the crap that Sergio Perez has had to put up with over the last couple of years, 3 second-place finishes in the first 4 races, doing just about everything that he needs to do to prove his doubters wrong and bring home a solid points haul for Red Bull and hopefully for their sake be able to clinch a 1-2 finish in the championship for the second year in a row. That's everything that Checo needs to do. He's not expected to beat Max. He is expected to come second to Max and maximize the team's constructors' points. And so far in 2024, he's doing just that. So more power to him. That's my one shining moment for this weekend.
Once again, for everyone tuning in, you too can invest in the Grid Network through Patreon. Colin, the show, Mark, Robin, David, Matthew, our newest one. That's why his name's in gold. If you want your name in gold, invest in us. Link in the video description. You can also do a one-time investment through Super Chat or buy me a coffee, $10 or more, or join our Patreon. You'll get some Grid Network stickers mailed out to you. And the simplest way to support us, help this channel grow, hit the subscribe button and click on the bell icon so you subscribe to us. Don't miss any of our programs. And be sure to visit gridranking.com. Matthew Bro will have his latest NASCAR article up from Martinsville. And of course, be sure to follow us on social media. We're everywhere, Grid Network, Grid Ranking. And a big thank you to everyone tuning in as always. Tomorrow, Ben will be on the air with Grid Live Encore. Kobe will be on the air Wednesday for Grid Tonight. Women in the Motorsports, Ben, myself, and Isha, including the NHRA with Cameron Caruso. Scary incident, but she's going to be recovering, and we're going to be talking about everything with and Roundtable. Be sure to follow us for more details on when that's going to be on the air. A lot to talk about. Grid Live After Dark had a sneak preview of that, so be sure not to miss it. And then we do this all over again next Saturday with Grid Live Pre-Race. For Ben Schneider and Kobe Lambeth, I'm Joe Samaniego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time.